Welcome to a presentation about art and World War II and the post-World War II era. Mikhail Petrovsky, director of the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia, said art belongs to humanity. Without this, we are animals. We just fight, we live, we die. Art is what makes us human. We're going to look at three essential questions today. What happened to art objects during World War II? How did children in concentration camps express their experience through art? And how did artists respond to war through art? How did art in the post-war era reflect the destruction of war? What happened to art objects during World War II? Harry Ettlinger, a monuments man, called World War II the greatest theft in history. We'll talk about the monuments men in a second, but first, let's talk about theft. Did the Nazis plunder art? It's not untypical in times of war for a conquering people to confiscate anything of value from the people they've defeated. The Nazis just did this on a scale greater than anything we'd seen in history. They did this mainly for three reasons. The first was to acquire art for a museum that Hitler dreamed of creating, called the Führer Museum. For this, he wanted the greatest art objects from around the world. He actually cataloged the art objects that he took. Some of these catalogs are still in existence and we know where they are, and some are still missing. Anything that wasn't good enough for his art museum met one of two fates. Modern art that Hitler felt was offensive and did not meet his high standards was destroyed. Some art objects were sold in order to fund the Third Reich. It's how they raised money. So who were the monuments men, and is art worth dying for? The monuments men was actually a group of both men and women, 345 people approximately, who were part of the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program under the Allied armies. The group was established in 1943, and their mission was to protect cultural property in war areas during and after World War II. They were not all originally members of the military. There were museum directors and curators, art historians, artists, educators, and architects in this group. Some of them lost their lives in their mission. In the years ending the war and the years after the war, they have returned 5 million artistic and cultural items stolen by Hitler and the Nazis, but there are still hundreds of thousands out there. Recovery of looted and plundered art is still going on around the world. In April, there was an article in the news about a family who are the heirs of a French art dealer seeking the return of a Matisse that was seized by the Nazis and is now held in the collection of a museum in Norway. Sometimes these things take a while to work out. The museum and the family both want to make sure that they establish ownership carefully. So they usually try to work together, but it can take a while. And then you may have heard in November about a trove of artworks. It was about 1,500 artworks found in the apartment of a Berlin citizen worth approximately $1.4 billion, and this was all art looted by the Nazis. For information on this topic, you can go to the Monuments Men Foundation, and there's also a movie coming out soon. It's directed and produced by George Clooney, and he stars in the movie along with Cate Blanchett and Matt Damon. So let's move on to our next question. How did children in concentration camps express their experience through art? We're going to look particularly at a concentration camp called Terezin, which is located in what is now the Czech Republic. So Terezin was in fact a concentration camp. It had the same rules and restrictions in place as any other concentration camp. What made it different, though, was that the Nazis marketed it as a model Jewish settlement. And in order to do that, they purposely sent scholars, artists, writers, and musicians to this camp. However, for most people at the camp, their fate was the same as members of any other concentration camp. They died from stress, disease, and starvation, or they were sent off to extermination camps. At the time of liberation, Terezin held approximately 1,600 children aged 15 and under. What you're looking at are pictures produced by the children while they were at the concentration camp. So the artists and musicians, the writers, and the scholars there taught the children the arts as a way of coping with the harsh conditions and the uncertainty and fear of their future. So for a lot of these children, they didn't survive, but their pictures did, and sometimes they're the only record that we have of their lives. So now let's look at our last question. How did artists respond to war through art? And how did art in that era reflect the destruction of war? Does art have to be a creative process? At the end of World War II and just after the war, there was a great change in the way art was being produced. Previously, artists had looked at the picture plane, so either the flat canvas or a piece of paper, as something almost sacred, but artists began to create by being extremely destructive in their creative process. They began to shoot at canvases, they would throw things like bottles of paint, rip, cut, and even burn canvas. The art object you're looking at is by Alberto Burri, and you can see how things are adhered to the canvas and it looks very rough. This one is by Lucio Fontana, and you can see where he has slashed the canvas. This is by Saburo Murakami, and I actually love his work. He took bottles of paint and threw them at the canvas, so he didn't control where they were landing, and some of these paintings hang on art museums and pieces still fall off of them. So you could ask yourself, is the artwork ever even done? This picture is by a French artist named Yves Klein, and he actually would wet some of the canvas and then burn other parts of it with a torch. This picture is by John Latham, and you can also see where he's been really destructive with the canvas. It's been ripped and sewn, and there's stuff attached to it. This is a picture by Salvatore Scarpita, and you can see where this one also has things attached to it, and there's been lots of ripping and cutting. And this is a favorite of mine by Niki de Saint-Phal, and she was a French-American artist, and she would attach things to the canvas that had paint inside of them, and then she would shoot at it with a shotgun. So if you paid attention to the names, you would know that you heard names from all over the world: French, American, Italian, Japanese. So from all over the world in different parts, and unbeknownst to each other, these artists were all beginning to create art by a very destructive process. This is the last one by Kazu Shiragawa, and it actually has boar's hair in it, and no, that's not blood, but it's very gruesome. So what do you think about art in World War II and the post-World War II era? We looked at three things today. What happened to art objects during World War II? How did children in concentration camps express their experience through art? And how did artists respond to war through art? How did art in the post-war era reflect the destruction of war? So some things for you to ask yourselves are, is art worth dying for? How does looking at art produced by children who were imprisoned and possibly exterminated make you feel? And what do you think of these artworks produced through destructive processes? Your teacher has some folders with some more information, and you can fill out an exit slip and give it to your advisory teacher. Thank you for listening today. I hope you got something out of this presentation, and I really appreciate your attention.